Once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. My next guest took over as the Bishop of the Diocese of Orange, California in 2012, after previously serving as Bishop of Fort Worth, Texas. I sat down with him recently in Southern California to talk about his hands-on ministry as well as his biggest project yet, transforming the iconic Crystal Cathedral into Christ Cathedral. As regular viewers of this program know, Bishop Vann recently partnered with Saddleback Church pastor Rick Warren on a mental health initiative which garnered international attention. We spoke about that as well during my exclusive interview with Bishop Kevin Vann. Tell me, how does a lab technician from Illinois end up in the land of Disney and Saddleback Mountain?
Do you know, Raymond, I've asked myself that many questions. Growing up in Central Illinois, as a child, I'd watch Sunday, The Wonderful World of Color with Walt Disney.
Sure.
At the same time, it would be at my grandparents' house, and my grandmother would watch Fulton Sheen.
Oh, boy.
You know, so I had all these visions of various things, and all of a sudden, years later, I'm here kind of connected with all that because Fulton Sheen was a good friend of Reverend Schuler as well.
That's right, and preached here. We're
here.
on the former Crystal Cathedral campus, now the Christ Cathedral campus of the diocese, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Now, you have been here in Orange for a little over a year.
Right, year and 3 months.
Just barely. How is this different from Fort Worth, Texas, your previous assignment?
Do you know what I always tell folks is that the big difference for me is territory. Because in Fort Worth, they had 25,000 square miles I was responsible for. It's a diocese that I really grew in love with the people. I really learned a lot about being a pastor of a huge diocese. I learned how to minister in with many ethnic groups, Vietnamese, Hispanics, Tongans, Koreans, Filipinos, all that in Fort Worth in Texas. And then here, I come here, the same ethnic groups, but double the Catholic population, but 730 square miles as opposed to 25,000 square miles.
Wow.
So that's the big difference to me.
It's a more digestible imprint for you.
Well, it's easier to get to places and see multiple things in one day. In Texas, I'd have to do it over 2 days or something.
Now, and as you referenced a minute ago, half of your flock here is Asian and Latino. How has that, that prep time in Fort Worth prepared you for this? And is there anything of your lab training that you tap into today?
Okay, I would say when I was in Fort Worth, we had 4 Vietnamese parishes. So I was able to learn and understand to some level the Vietnamese culture and to be able to learn some Vietnamese, liturgical Vietnamese for Mass. So I was able to build on that when I came here and learn a little more. And then, of course, in Fort Worth, I knew Spanish when I arrived there, but I was able to use it all the time there. And then here, it's casi lo mismo. I use it a lot here. So that was good preparation. And then my lab tech training, you know, I spent a lot of my life around a hospital. And so here, if I have time, I visit the hospitals. And so that's still part of my life. And having had that background in med tech, it gives me some sense of medical ethics and all those sort of things as well. So all that comes into play.
Yeah, well, we certainly have seen it in so many ways in your ministry. Talking to people here in Orange County, they tell me, and they refer to you as the bishop of the people. And the reason they say that is because, and I'm quoting a number of folks, not just one or two, who say, you turn around, Bishop Vann's at a parish. You go over here, he's at a parish cookout. You turn around, he's doing a funeral. He's everywhere. He seems to be everywhere. Now, as I've dug into this, it seems these parish visits are not just drop-bys. You don't just say hello, take a few pictures and a mass, and you're out. You stay. I mean, you have dinner, you have lunch. In some cases, you're spending the night at the rectory. Why do you do that?
I would chalk it up to maybe a couple different sources. First of all, my mother and father raised us to always be concerned about others. My mother was a maternity nurse, took care of mothers and families. My father was a postal worker. They always were in service to others. I grew up in a wonderful parish in Springfield, Illinois, St. Agnes. Had a good example of the priests and all that, so I was always comfortable in a parochial environment. The bishop that ordained me many years ago now, Bishop Nicholas, was very much a people person, was always out in parishes. So I kind of had that as a role model pretty early on. And then my years as a pastor, Blessed Sacrament, Auburn, all these Decatur, all these places taught me the importance of being a pastor and being present. So I kind of learned over the years what a pastor was for me.
Right.
And then that became then sort of my frame of reference when I became the Bishop of Fort Worth. I mean, you'll recall that I was supposed to be in the coadjutor. It didn't happen. I became the bishop right away. So what did I have to fall back on was my years as a pastor. So that's kind of what was my kind of rule and guide in my life. And I've worked to always keep that as a part of my life ever since.
No, but I found that interesting and almost unique that the bishop goes and spends the night at the various rectories. Is that to get a better sense of the clergy and as well as the people?
Well, you can look at that two levels. What's prescribed for a bishop is parish visitations. If you look in the Code of Canon Law, you're supposed to do that. And so the best way to do that is to spend the week in a parish. So you have evening mass. So you have dinner with the priest. So you meet the staff and take your time. And then the next day I have all the masses and go to whatever socials and then visit the sick. I mean, so it's kind of, for me, it works that well.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I want to talk about this amazing facility here, which is the new Christ Cathedral facility. And you've got an academy here and your chancery offices. There's this cultural center. There's so much happening here. I want to talk specifically first about the renowned Crystal Cathedral. Anybody who knows the Hour of Power and saw Reverend Schuler all those years, they know it. Would this have been your choice for a place of Catholic worship initially?
Let me put this in this context. Any assignment in my life as a priest and a bishop, I've never asked for. Everything's come to me. So I accept it as this is where the Lord wants me to be. And in fact, there's a bit of a funny story. I was here in August of 2012 for the Knights of Columbus Supreme Convention. I came with my priest secretary from Fort Worth, and we got to tour the campus, and I met some of the folks. And I thought, this is a great place. I thought, this is huge. It's beautiful. What an opportunity. I thought, but this is going to be a lot of work for whoever inherits it, because I knew Bishop Brown well, who was going to retire. Well, lo and behold, 4 weeks later, I get the phone call that I'm coming here.
And you'd already taken the tour, thank God.
I had already taken the tour of it.
What are you doing to the interior of the Crystal Cathedral? Because it is so bright. It is not exactly a place amenable to shadow and mystery and solitude. What are you going to do?
Well, of course, the polity would be more congregational or Baptist or that sort of thing. And so if you're looking right now, for example, you'll see the seats aren't there and the organ's gone. The organ has gone back to Padua, Italy to be actually restored. I went to Padua to sign the contract at the Basilica of San Antonio.
Tough job.
Yeah, so I did that. But as well, we have what we call an Art and Architectural Renovation Committee, and that is working with Brother William Wolger out of Omaha, who has a very Catholic sense of things, and then 2 architects, one for the inside and one for the outside. And we're in the process of the renderings, and so it really is like taking a blank slate. How do you take what had been a polity that was preaching to one that's sacramental and mystery and sign and symbol? And the drawings will be done, I think, probably early this summer, I hope, perhaps. But I'm encouraged by what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing, because I'm involved in a lot of the things.
We'll be amazed to see what happens in the years to come.
Yes.
This is a multi-year project,
It's
right?
a multi-year project, certainly. I think we're thinking maybe 2016 to have it completed.
But there was no cathedral here for the diocese?
No, because, if you look at the history of how dioceses are made,
Right.
very similar in Fort Worth, because Fort Worth was created in 69 off of Dallas. Here is 76 off of Los Angeles. The newer dioceses take a parish church and designate that at the cathedral.
I see.
So in Fort Worth, it became St. Patrick's. Here, it became Holy Family in Orange. So you have a parish church that, of course, is the cathedral, but in kind of the sense of the diocese, most people, it's still a parish church. So this then makes really a statement that this is a center for unity, art, music, welcome, faith, evangelization, and everything.
No, it's amazing. I want to shift gears a little bit, talk about your chairmanship of the Catholic Legal Immigration Network.
Certainly.
Now, this is a network of some 250 plus Catholic outreaches.
Right.
Why is the church engaged in that work? And give us some sense of what those organizations do.
Well, I am still learning, because I just took it over for my first meeting last week. I would say about a year ago, Cardinal Dolan called me and said, would you take this over? He says, you had experience in Texas. He said, now I have experience in California with so many immigrant groups. He said, I think you'd be suited for that. So I said, well, and Tim's been a friend of mine for years. I said, well, let me kind of think about that. So he asked me a second time. So I said, yes, I would do that. So I had experience with clinic, as we call it before, when I was in Texas, because part of the challenge these days is having religious workers come up and minister to the people.
Right.
So you have to get what's called an F1 visa for students or an R1, those sort of things. It's very complex, labor-intensive work, and clinic did that for us.
I see.
So I knew some of what they do. So part of it is helping priests and religious come up here to minister. It's a big part of it. Another one is working with refugees and those sorts of things. So I'm just kind of learning everything that they do. And we had our first board meeting last week.
Wow. Given what we've seen with the interaction between the church and the federal government vis-a-vis healthcare, why is the church so insistent and consistently going to the government for relief for immigrants and for these Catholic organizations that are helping them?
Let me speak to that as a pastor from my experience. For example, I tell you, I went to Ghana 4 or 5 years ago because I had a relationship with Archbishop Sarpong in Kumasi, who I knew because there were a lot of Ghanaians in Fort Worth. I had a meeting with the religious, with the priests, with the laity in the parish, in the cathedral. First question I ask is, how are you helping our families in Ghana who need help, who have problems with visas? How are you, Bishop, helping them? Then I've known several families who over the years have a number of children, but they live in constant fear of being deported and traveling any place. And so they want to be fully contributing members to this country that they love, like my Irish ancestors did. So I always approach that as a pastor. What can I do? How can we work together to try to take care of them spiritually, but also kind of help do what we can to try to rectify these situations?
Yeah. We hear from people all the time in the emails. This is such a delicate subject. It has risen and fallen many times on Capitol Hill. People ask the question, doesn't the church have an obligation, and isn't it going about its work to minister to these people, regardless of whether they're documented or undocumented? And doesn't the government have a separate role to control its borders and regulate immigration?
Again, what do you say to families that you meet when you say, Father, how can you help me? Father, we need help. We live in fear. What can you do to help us with this?
Yeah. And you feel the government is really the only, you have to.
I feel we have to keep our mind on how do we help these folks best as pastors who people care for souls and bodies to provide for them, to help them to live freely and not in fear.
Tell me about this mental health gathering that you and Rick Warren are doing here in Orange. This is extraordinary. It's the first time the diocese and Saddleback Church, this large evangelical church, have collaborated on a project. Why this one?
Well, let me kind of put this in a larger context. I've always been involved in ecumenical relationships, usually wherever I've been. But I came here to Orange and found a great network of ecumenical relationships, thanks to Bishop Brown and the ecumenical vicars who have worked with this for over years. So Rick, in fact, was at my installation. And so then we met shortly after that, sort of kept in touch. Then when his son committed suicide, I called him. And I would really call he and Kay just to check in on them monthly, every couple of weeks. They didn't have to respond back, but I called them. So he and I began to talk about all this afterwards. And so we kind of thought together, given the good relationships that are here in Orange County anyway between churches, how can we do something together? How can we do something that contributes to ourselves, Saddleback and ourselves, and NAMI, doing something that in common we can help those who struggle with these things.
What was your personal attachment and experience with this issue of mental health? I know as a pastor you encountered a number of people, particularly early in your ministry.
Yeah, well, I would say primarily, again, as a pastor, so often people will come to the rectory, how can you help us? When you work with the homeless, you see folks who struggle, obviously, and then folks who struggle with depression and other things. And, I think I've said, one of the first things I had to do as a newly ordained deacon in 1980, first funeral I ever preached, was a person who committed suicide. That was, Father said, this is what we're doing this week. So I did. So I had to deal with that and the family and everything, and then other things as well.
Yeah, so this conference is an attempt to do what?
The conference is how to help and equip, say, pastoral workers, church workers, parish workers, to be able to respond in a way that's helpful to make good referrals and appropriate referrals. Because so often when they would come or call, you don't know what to do. I would say here one of the things that we're doing is we're continuing the Hope line that Reverend Schuler had, a 24-hour line where people call in when they have concerns about taking their life. Wow. It's called the Hope line. So Reverend Schuler had that, and we're keeping it up.